Hello, and welcome to What Are the Odds? In today's video, we will discuss the likelihood that the events are to be repeated in The Martian.
Matt Damon is in space.
You may want to be more specific.
Matt Damon is in a movie about space.
That's not exactly what I meant. You see,
The actor, Matt Damon, is in a movie. Someone is in space.
we're going backwards now.
Someone is in space on Mars in a movie. Astronaut Mark Watney was left behind on Mars.
Close enough. Mark Watney and company are working outside when a storm is rolling in with an estimated force of 8,600 newtons. The crew prep for emergency departure. Mark gets swept away in the storm and they are forced to leave him behind, presumed dead. Mark awakes with his oxygen level critical. He manages to return to base and tends to his wounds. On Sol 19, Watney makes log entry number 9. He's making the log in case he doesn't make it. A length of the primary communications antenna broke off, tore through his bow monitor, and tore through him. Luckily, the antenna and blood sealed the breach in his suit. He has no way to contact NASA, and it would take 4 years for a manned mission to reach him. He is in a hab built to last only 31 days. Sol 21. Watney takes inventory of all the food. During log entry number 13, Mark does some math. Their surface mission was supposed to last 31 sols. For redundancy, they were sent 68 sols worth of food for 6 people, so for just Mark it would amount to 300 sols worth, which he figures he can stretch to 400 days. This means he has to find a way to make 3 years worth of food. Fortunately, Mark is a botanist. On Sol 22, he begins work towards that goal. On Sol 31, he mixes a batch to create fertilizer, aiming to plant potatoes. He determines his problem to be water. He's created 126 square meters of soil. Every cubic meter of soil requires 40 liters of water to be farmable. To make water, he'll take the hundreds of liters of unused hydrazine at the MDV, run it over an iridium catalyst to separate it into N2 and H2 gases. From there, he just needs to direct the hydrogen into a small area and burn it. Because everything sent to Mars is flame retardant, Watney must use Martinez's personal effects. The reaction literally blows up in his face. Back on Earth, they've announced that Mark is dead. Through satellite images, it's discovered that Mark is actually still alive. Back to Mark. He determines that the next mission, Ares 4, is supposed to land at Schiaparelli crater 3,200 kilometers away. In 4 years, he'll have to be there. As of now, he's got one functional rover designed for 35 kilometers of travel before recharge at the hab. Other than that, the journey will take 50 days to complete, meaning he'll have to survive inside the rover for 50 days with minimal life support. Sol 74. During log 120, Mark discusses the matter of saving battery life in the rover by not using the heat. To solve his heating problem, he'll dig up the radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Now, he'll be warm because of the decaying radioactive isotope behind his back. Back on Earth, they discuss their options. They aren't able to contact Mark yet. It will take 9 months to get a resupply to the landing site of the Ares 4. They don't want to inform the Hermes crew until a rescue plan is put into place. Sol 79. 48 sols since he planted the potatoes, it's time to reap and resow. He has 400 healthy potato plants. Mark digs up the Pathfinder on Sol 109. It enables him to communicate with NASA by asking yes and no questions answered via a point of a camera. Mark posits to create an alphabet. However, 26 letters into 360 degrees only leaves 13 degrees of separation, a margin too narrow. Mark resorts to hexadecimals, figuring one of his crewmates left behind an ASCII table. On Sol 110, Mark marks 17 points in the ground. Mark receives information on how to hack the rover to link the Pathfinder's broadcast frequency. Thanks to this, Mark is able to receive and send text-based messages. Mark finds out they haven't informed the crew that he's alive. The conversation devolves into vulgar profanities. They decide to inform the Hermes crew. Sol 128, there's a room full of people now dedicated to micromanaging his crops. With a 9-month arrival time once they finish, the probe will be on Mars on Sol 868. The botany team estimates his crops will last until Sol 912. During Sol 134, disaster strikes. When entering the HAB, depressurization goes wrong and the airlock is destroyed. Mark is sent flying in the airlock. His suit is breached. Using duct tape, he seals the cracks in his helmet before his oxygen depletes. He leaves the airlock to discover that the interior of the HAB is now compromised. His crop field is frozen over. He relays what happened to NASA. The crops are dead. The water boiled off and the crops remaining died exposed to the atmosphere. The rations will get Mark to 409 and the remaining potatoes will last him until Sol 609. To get the probe to launch in time, Bruce and his team will need to finish in 47 days. Sol 136. NASA lets Hermes directly contact Mark. Mark seals the breach in the HAB. Pressure stabilizes. To buy time, NASA plans to stretch Mark's rations 4 more days and cancel the inspections of the probe. Instead of eating 3 rations every 1 day, he eats 1 every 3 days. Now he must stretch it further by another 2/3. 4 weeks later, they are ready to launch the probe for resupply. The launch is a failure. Sol 186. In order to accelerate the launch schedule, they skipped inspection, which reveals a problem with 1 in every 20 probes. Thanks to Bruce's connections in China, they'll have another shot. They finished the Iris probe in 62 days. They'll have to attempt to finish now in 28. Rich Purnell from Astrodynamics claims to be able to get the probe back to Mars by Sol 561. He proposes that the Hermes uses a gravity assist to maintain acceleration and resupply with the probe and accelerate back to Mars. They would then perform a flyby that Mark would intercept using the MAV. Hermes decides to go against NASA's decision and force their hand to perform the Rich Purnell maneuver against their wishes, risking their lives for another 533 days. NASA learns of this decision. Sol 219. Mark strives to go after the pre-supply for the Ares 4 mission. In the next 200 days, he'll have to move everything that's keeping him alive, including the oxygenator, water reclaimer, and the atmospheric regulator. 7 months later, Sol 461. Mark is much skinnier, having lost weight. He drives 4 hours before noon, lays the solar panels, lets them recharge for 13 hours, and starts anew. Sol 517. There is a problem with the intercept velocity. The Hermes can't enter Mars's orbit. To have Mark escape the orbit, he'll need to be going extremely fast. For that, they'll have to make the MAV 5,000 kilograms lighter. They won't need 500 kilograms of the Martian soil. Without extra passengers and equipment, it will save another 500 kilograms. If the MAV is remotely controlled, they can afford to lose the control panels, secondary and tertiary comm systems, also the nose airlock, windows, and hull panel 19. They'll have Mark cover the front of his ship with HAB canvas. Sol 538, Mark preps the MAV. Sol 561, they're about to perform the maneuver, and Mark is saved. This film's final event is that Mark survives 561 sols, or 576 Earth days, and is rescued. Factors include the rescue attempt itself, his food supply, his shelter, and the relocation needed. As for the reasons, anything that aids in Mark's survival and ultimate rescue can be considered a factor. For the odds, we'll focus on the major events that occurred during the 561 sols Mark is on Mars. During the 561 sols, the major events are establishing contact with Earth, the airlock depressurization mishap, and the creation of the Iris probe. For everything else, we'll trust in the math and science involved to see Watney home. Establishing communication is merely a means to reduce Watney's chances of going insane. Also, this helps give him a foreseeable goal to achieve. Watney's mental health and the timeline of his escape won't be considered odds-wise, however. Therefore, we'll determine whether or not he makes contact at all, and early enough will be 1/2. Skipping the inspection supposedly leaves a 19/20 chance that the probe is okay. For Mark to ultimately survive his Mars journey, all he needs to do is avoid being killed due to the atmosphere of Mars. We can extend this to regular accidents, illnesses, starvation, dehydration, as well as other elements that could thwart Mark's survival. For this, we'll take the original Hermes mission of 31 sols and assume a survival rate of 5/6 for that duration. We'll extend that process for 561 sols. 31 goes into 561 18 times, so Mark would have to be in the 5/6 18 times. Multiplying the odds, we get 1/2 times 19/20 times 5/6 to the 18th power. This works out to 72 trillion over 4 quadrillion, or reduces to 14 trillion over 812 trillion. Well, now we know. If you were to travel to a random split with the exact same necessary initial conditions, the likelihood that you'd see these same events transpire and the successful outcome of the final event is 1.78%. Thanks for watching.